political campaigns are in full swing, with political parties campaigning in earnest for the upcoming local government elections. eNCA's Govan Whittles, senior journalist, joins us now live to talk about some of the things and the goings-on that have been happening on the campaign trail. Govan, thank you. It's good to have you with us. Yeah, for a change, let's let that Sipamandla rest a little bit.
Yeah, I'm here from the field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Govan, let's talk about President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's hit the campaign trail as well. We've been seeing, other leaders of political parties in the opposition also launching their manifestos and campaigning. What's been the one theme that has emerged for you in Cyril Ramaphosa's campaign on behalf of the ANC?
I think the most standout feature of the ANC's campaign so far has been that its president has taken this campaign by the horns, and he's leading it. He's essentially the first comment coming out of the ANC. During the local government elections, where last time in 2016 we saw many of the aspiring mayors, ward councillor candidates speaking on behalf of the party, particularly Fikile Mbalula last time as well, and the head of elections in Luthuli House at that time, I believe it was Nomvula Mokonyane. But this time what we're seeing is the president trying to frame the election message of the ANC to something that appears to be that the ANC that you're voting for right now is not the same ANC that's put your town or your municipality into that mess, because I, Cyril Ramaphosa, have been rolling out these interventions which I believe will stabilize your town. And the president goes very far in this campaign. In fact, he says that he will personally induct all of the ward councillors in the ANC. And that's obviously meant to give the voter this impression that even though these councillors are dodgy or they may not trust him, they should trust Cyril Ramaphosa, who says that he will now overhaul this entire municipal system of governance. Very close to the New Dawn message. And the 2019 election campaign. So
before we hear from the president on the campaign trail, Govan, is that where this whole idea of emphasizing that, by the way, you guys forget that the ANC is not in government in Nelson Mandela Bay, so what you see there as a mess is the DA's mess. I've heard the same message being pushed around Tshwane, for example, that whatever is not working in Tshwane is not the ANC's problem, it's the DA's problem, but also this emphasis on the candidates we have now have been vetted and they've been interviewed with them being fit for purpose.
Yeah, vetted by the former president of the country, Kgalema Motlanthe, which the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, says is an entirely new process, once again dissociating himself from the councillors' vetting system in the past, which was just an approval of 3 names at a regional level, then a provincial level, and then it gets okayed by the NEC. Somehow the president trying to make South Africans believe that his new vetting system is so different to what they had used before that it must mean that fit-for-purpose people and those who are capably qualified to not only represent the community but for the community to trust will be put into those positions. And they mentioned that we're not in government in Tshwane, in Nelson Mandela Bay. They don't mention Johannesburg because, of course, they've held it for a significant period. But the truth is that he's not holding the ANC in those areas accountable for the lack of progress in the coalition government due to council meetings not being able to sit because of large boycotts and due to disruptions at the Nelson Mandela Bay Council, which led to physical confrontations between council members and the opposition. So the ANC remains complicit, but what's interesting from the president has been the way that he's framed this. It's almost as if the ANC is a new party and they're contesting these elections for the first time. But we know they have some lofty ambitions, and the president is in the Eastern Cape. Let's have a look at what he had to say in Nelson Mandela Bay about that campaign.
Let us go and return the ANC back into power. My Pumi DA, my Pumi.
My Pumi DA, my Pumi, out with the DA out. It's I don't know, it just lacks a bit of that conviction, I don't know, I'm not convinced. It doesn't have that fighting energy. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Speaking of fighting energy, there are always these interesting dynamics. All opposition parties have their eyes fixated on the governing party, whichever governing party is in charge in any particular municipality. But then you get these little contests that are sort of side contests. And it would seem there's one playing out between Helen Zille and the Good Party.
That's right, between Patricia de Lille's party and now John Steenhuisen's party. The reason this is interesting to Lesizwe is because when the Good Party was formed and Patricia de Lille was contesting the 2019 elections, Mmusi Maimane was in charge of the DA. And before she left the DA, she was perceived as being his ally. And we saw in the run-up to the vote, the DA not lashing the Good Party as hard as we've seen them lash them this season. But what we've seen in the run-up to these local polls is that it's clear there is an all-out war between the Democratic Alliance and the Good Party, particularly happening in the Western Cape. And this is centered on a video made by former Springbok coach Peter de Villiers in the run-up to the 2019 elections, in which he endorses Patricia de Lille's Good Party. And he says, Patricia de Lille's always been known as a corruption buster, and therefore you should vote for the Good Party. And that video was then edited to take out the section where Patricia de Lille has always been known as a corruption buster, and kept it at Patricia has always been known for corruption.
You lie, I
Therefore,
didn't see that.
You should vote for the Good Party.
I didn't see that.
That's what's happened. Helen Zille has circulated that video.
Who did the editing?
Online.
An ordinary person.
Tell you what, the DA says it was definitely not Helen Zille who manipulated that video. I spoke to John Steenhuisen about it. He says it was a spoof. You know, and it was shared innocently as people share information during the election. But it's more serious. The IEC has found the Helen Zille guilty of spreading misinformation. And there's a sanction that comes with that. And we spoke to John Steenhuisen about this. What's interesting is that he revealed in his response on this question that they'll now lay a complaint against the Good Party, because the Good Party accused the city of Cape Town of trying to ban the adhan, the call to prayer, with the new bylaws which limit what they call noise nuisance.
Noise and nuisance, yeah.
Exactly. So the DA is saying that's just not true. It's electioneering, but it's interesting that it's happening between these two players, because these are essentially children of the DA that are fighting here. Let's have a look at what John Steenhuisen had to say.
Well, I think it was a bit of a harmless spoof that was done on social media, and it was shared. It wasn't created by Helen Zille. It was something that was widely shared across the internet. And of course, I mean, we'll take whatever actions necessary. We don't encourage the spreading of fake news. But it's ironic that Good laid the complaint when they themselves have now been involved in fake news dissemination about the call to prayer issue in Cape Town. There's no restriction on the call to prayer. It's something that the Good Party have made up. It's good lies that they're spreading. So we'll be lodging a complaint as well with the IEC, and we hope the IEC is going to treat that complaint as quickly and circumspectly as they treated the Goods complaint.
Listen, Govan, I don't like calling it the silly season, but I think for the first time I get why they call it that, because, you know, someone lays a complaint against you and you immediately find something else to complain about that particular person. And I don't know about a harmless spoof, because, you know, there is a code of conduct. Of course, they're saying they didn't create or manipulate that video, but, you know, Helen Zille shared it. But I wonder to what extent this goes against the code of conduct. Talk to me about smaller political parties. We have a bit of a focus on that at 5 p.m. Tell me about their readiness. What have you been observing around them being ready to take on the big guns?
This election was different from the 2016 election, which I also covered, in the 2019 election. There appears to be a clear commitment by these smaller parties to focus on very small constituencies in areas where they know they stand a chance of either winning or bringing the majority to below 50%. And these parties have emerged in a format of residents' association. You have the New Horizon movement, which is essentially a group of independents in Mfuleni. We have a second time running for the Forum for Service Delivery. You mentioned earlier the former Bushbuck Ridge Residents Association.
Yeah.
But then you also have the ATM, the Patriotic Alliance, and a number of these other small parties. And I bring this up because this has got the DA incredibly worried. The DA saying that they now realize that we may be heading towards a splinter of the opposition into small fragments that are aligned to very narrow issues. And they believe, at least the Democratic Alliance, that it will lead to an incapability to not only confront the ANC, but to create an alliance to vote against the ANC or block the ANC's movements in the different town councils in the municipalities. So this is appearing as a really serious concern among opposition parties. And it doesn't look like there is any work being done to arrest the slide towards a more narrow issue, a smaller issue that's perhaps confined to your town or your municipality, which would lead to you having representation in your council, but not enough muscle around that representation to try and form alliances and push through the budget. The DA is worried because they think these parties could be co-opted by the ANC when they become kingmakers and inevitably just end up approving ANC budgets.
And we've seen some of that horse trading involving these smaller parties, and some of them issue-based in municipal councils where there was no outright winner. I mean, the AIC comes forward as the best example with that Eguruleni situation and what their ambitions and targets were around Matatiele, for example, and the redrawing of the boundaries there. Issue-specific, representing a specific community, but now a big kingmaker in a different context. Lastly, Govan, talk to me about visibility in this election season.
Just very quickly, I don't know if you've noticed the posters here in Johannesburg, Thulasizwe, but it's chalk and cheese compared to 2019 and 2016. Look, we know the parties are struggling with their budgets. Obviously, a lot of them have had to declare, but we don't understand why some of the other smaller parties are not performing the way they used to. So far, we've got the Freedom Front Plus, the Democratic Alliance, Action SA, really with strong posters, pictures of candidates that are up on the different polls, the light polls, and communicating a clear message. And then we're seeing the EFF. The main posters are still come to our manifesto launch, and the ANC has been promising a rollout of posters since the president was in Mpumalanga, which is 2 weeks ago. They haven't followed through. So what's clear in this election is that the visibility of the parties is now up to their activists, their volunteers in the communities, and it looks like the main strategy, particularly among parties in power, has been to parade the personalities and try to have the personalities do the campaigning for you without the willingness to spend on the traditional forms like posters.
It's an interesting observation. To what extent do you know the person, the actual person you'll be electing, as opposed to their national leader? Govan Whittles, thank you so much for coming through. Reporting for us from the Outpost was eNCA's Govan Whittles.